Hi everyone, welcome to week 8, movie week. I'm a bit late recording this one because I've had a few days off on holiday with the half term and the lovely weather. You can probably tell by the peely nose and the sunburn. So week 8 is movie week. For the pattern challenge I had to make a dirty dancing dress, which is like a fitted bodice, circular skirt with a chiffon overlay. The tricky bit was the fabrics that they had to do it in. So they were asked to do it in a kind of a satiny fabric and then with a chiffon overlay, and both of those fabrics are really tricky to sew because they are slippery and they move, and also the pattern was cut for the skirt was cut on the bias, so that moves as well. So if you don't pin it out exactly, the pattern can shift and then you've got two different shapes. Nightmare. Believe me, I know. I'm sewing a prom dress at the moment which is cut on the bias, and it is very tricky to sew. So the other things to think about as well was once these fabrics are marked with a needle, it's very difficult for it not to show, so you have to get it right first time. So I think Rebecca had to unpick one seam because she sewed a right side to a wrong side, so it wasn't correct, but that's fine on a seam. But you had, like the zip, for example, if you didn't do the zip right first time, you'd be stuffed because you'd be able to see the pinpricks where the needle went in and out. And you have to be careful what pins you use. You need a nice fine pin, otherwise it's going to mark as well. Right, so the pattern challenge, they had to make the bodice. So basically they had to make a bodice in the satin fabric and in the lining. Then they stitch those together around the neck and the armholes, bag it out. Then you're left with the shoulder seams to do. So hopefully your back and your front shoulder seams, because you've done exactly 5/8 of an inch shoulder seam seams throughout, they will be exactly the same width, and they had to hand stitch those together. Now some of the sewers made a bit of a pig's ear of that. This challenge really showed the who was the more technical sewers and who's been winging it, mentioning no names. So Serena's was very well sewn, Rebecca's was well sewn. They really nitpicked about hers not meeting. I mean, there was a tiny bit off, but you buy a dress from a shop, you have a look at the shoulder seams, they probably won't be 100% accurate. And then the skirt was a circular skirt made up of 3 pieces cut on the bias, so you had to sew those together for the underskirt in the satin, and then sew the chiffon over the top. Then there was a waistband panel, which the skirt attached to the waistband, and then the waistband attached to the bodice. The other tricky bit was the rolled hem. Because you're dealing with such fine fabrics, you don't want to do a turnover and then another turnover. You're going to get a bulky hem, so you do a rolled hem using a special foot on the machine that just turns over a small amount of fabric. And for the chiffon, that's really hard because you have to try not to stretch it, otherwise it's going to go really fluted. And with the satin as well, you just don't want to pull it, otherwise the fabric's going to twist. So those were things to look out for. So Damien did his in a bright red satin with I can't remember, it had a sort of a late, no, I'm getting confused with the last challenge, with a red chiffon overlay. Esme didn't like him using biro to mark his tailor's tacks and darts, and I don't blame her because there's no guarantee that that's going to come off. He did say he had his bar of Vanish soap and I think he did get it off, but it's much better to use chalk or a erasable pen, or do tailor's tacks. I know it takes longer, but I still use tailor's tacks. And he wasn't so good on the hand stitching element. His big fumbly fingers trying to do that. Serena's was the pale blue, and hers was really well sewn. The hem on her chiffon was really good. She actually trimmed the chiffon back. She hung it on the dummy and saw that the chiffon had dropped, so trimmed it off and then hemmed it, which was, I think she was the only one who did that. All the other ones, you could see the hem was a bit all over the place. Rebecca's was in the pale grey. and she had really beautiful lace detail on it to have that kind of pointy bits that came down. That was very lovely. Hers was well sewn. Her hem was a bit wonky, but her bodice was beautifully sewn, apart from the tiny little bit out on the shoulders. Farie was in bright pink, which is the same colour as the jumper she was wearing, I noticed. Unfortunately, she didn't finish, which is becoming her, I wouldn't say forte, but it's not a really good thing to be known for, is it? And then lastly, Raph, he struggled a bit this week as well. He did it in the burgundy with the burgundy chiffon overlay, and he didn't quite finish either. He didn't get the applique on the waistband. So that was the pattern challenges. I have got a few satins to show you. I don't really have any chiffons, although I've got a few. So this is quite a robust satin. It's a polyester satin. I've just picked out the red. We have got it in some more subtle colours. And then I have got a more of a matte a matte satin. This is what I'm making a prom dress in at the moment, but in a different colourway. This is really very fluid. It's very slippery. Ooh, that's the right way around. It is slightly shiny. It's got more of a matte finish to it. This is quite like Rebecca's one. It's very fluid. The other thing we have in is the Silky Prints. These are they are a satin, and they've got 5% spandex in, so they do stretch a tiny little bit as well. I've got a couple of colourways in that. And then I do have some of the chiffon-y, organza-y type fabrics as an overlay. It's not really what they used. They used more of a sort of a boil-y chiffon. So pattern-wise, I found a few. This side, I always do that, don't I? So McCalls 7599 was the one that was most like the Dirty Dancing dress. That's a full circular skirt. The only thing it doesn't have is the separate waistband detail. The same with this one. It's not a full circular skirt, but it's got quite nice flattering pleats here and a couple of different lengths that you can do it in. This one is a bit more like the style because it's got the waistband detail, but again, it's not the full circular skirt. It's got a couple of tucks in, but it's quite a full skirt. They've also done a straight skirt option. There's quite a few options on that actually, with different tops. So it's quite a good pattern to have. The same with this one. It's not a full circular skirt, but it does have the waistband detail. You can either do it in a full skirt or a straight skirt, that one. And then finally this one I picked it out because it does have the chiffon overlay, and it has like a deep waistband. Not quite the same, but similar kind of thing. So that's those. The pattern challenge, no, not the pattern challenge, the transformation challenge was a bit Sound of Music, and they had to take a pair of curtains and turn it into a child's outfit, and it had to be a trouser or a short of some kind. I thought Rebecca's was really clever, and I can't quite work out why she didn't win. But there we go. So Rebecca, she used the lining as a contrast fabric. So she had the main curtain fabric, which is kind of purpley, swirly, yucky stuff, and then she put a contrast bow and a contrast waistband made out of the plain cream lining, and it just transformed it. It was a little dress, but she'd really cleverly sewn the shorts in underneath, so it was like a skirt kind of thing. So little girls running around, they're not going to go flashing their pants. So I thought that was really clever. Serena did the kimono style culottes. She used the trimming from the curtain for the waistband on the cuffs and on the hem, which kind of set it off really nicely. Farie did some long dungarees with little fluted cap sleeves, but she hadn't got her zip in, so once again she hadn't finished, unfortunately. Raph did some long lederhosen, and Esme liked the way that he'd used the pinch pleats around the top on the waistband, but in all honesty, you know how stiff that would be with all that fabric gathered up. A child would never be able to wear those. And finally Damien did some long shorts with sort of braces, straps, and he got out his hammer and he put some press studs in instead of a fly, but as Esme did them, they flew off, so that wasn't so successful. Excuse me. Finally, the made to measure. So they had to make a glamour dress inspired by Dream Girls that would be fit for Diana Ross and the Supremes. So we saw lots of glitter and sequins and shiny stuff, really. Oh, and upholstery fabric as well. So starting with Serena's, she did a very striking red and sort of gold. I can't work out if it was gold or silver. I think it was red and gold. It had a kind of an S shape in it. All the seams were beautifully matched up. But I didn't think it fitted that well. I think with a dress like that, it really needed to fit snugly, and it was a bit loose on the model. But all her seams, you know, where she joined the two fabrics and then met them at the side seams, they were all perfectly matched, which is what you'd expect. Pattern wise, I think she drafted her own pattern, or she took a pattern and then adapted it. So I picked out a few patterns. I think that was a stretch sequin that she'd used, really, really unforgiving, because if the fabric drags at all, that's it. It's not going to drape so well. So we've got McCalls 8038. This is a slinky number as well, 7999. And this one, which is also shown in a sequiny fabric, it's not quite the same style because it's more with this kind of off the shoulder thing, 7047, but you've got the basic shape of the dress there. Okay, Rebecca's gold dress was absolutely stunning. Fitted the model like a dream. It was a gold satin with a sequin panel in the bodice and on the matching waistband, and then this really floaty chiffon fishtail. It was cut in at the shoulder, so it was really flattering, so it gave it a halter neck kind of look, but it wasn't. It was a really good fit, and yeah, just beautifully sewn. So a few similar kind of patterns. So McCalls 7569, that has the fishtail hem at the bottom here, and there's different ones. There's a halter neck one, and there's a normal bodice style one. And that one, although it's not a fishtail, it's got that kind of flared from the knee outwards kind of effect, just a straight dress. So Raph and his gold lame jumpsuit was really striking. He put this kind of foil over the top of it. His use of fabrics is amazing, but I think that's his job, isn't it? So he had this jumpsuit with a very deep V front, and then he'd put this feathering down one side or both sides, I can't quite remember, and then he made a cape with these feathers that stood up, which was quite dramatic. Patrick did mention that the cape wasn't very well sewn, which I think is probably why it didn't get garment of the week. But if we're judging it for the sewing, then it's absolutely right that Rebecca won garment of the week. And so pattern wise, I think this may have been the pattern he used. It's McCalls 7910. It I think he probably did this one. Yeah, this is the wide leg version. You can see the front just crosses over, which is what his did. But it fitted his model superbly. So that is 7910. There's another similar kind of pattern here, which is 7366. They do it in a halter neck version, seen in the white, as well as the crossover version, but you could do it without the sleeves. So that is Raph. Yeah, Raph. Damien's was a Vogue pattern. You just got a glimpse of the Vogue pattern, which was originally made in black and white, all the different bits. He had a real mishmash of fabrics and different weights of fabrics. I don't think he'd really thought it through. The overall effect was it was striking, but it wasn't a show dress. It wasn't a Diana Ross dress. He'd got stiff upholstery fabrics mixed with lighter weight satins, and then he'd interface the satins. Had a similar problem to Serena last week when, no, not last week, yeah, last week. She'd ironed the interfacing onto the back of the satin to make it a heavier weight, but it had all bubbled. Anyway, it didn't fit well. He hadn't tried it on the model. It was all loose across the back, so it was just too big. And then finally Farie, she actually finished, yay! Really, really stunning, bright red satin dress with that lace overlay and then the single lace sleeve. And that actually had a lot of work in it, because you had to bind the edges of all the sleeve, and it was attached really carefully so it wasn't pulling. I thought it was really clever. And then the thigh length slit, I have to say that very carefully. Yeah, I was really impressed with that. But Rebecca was the worthy winner of that one. So Farie's, I couldn't find anything like Farie's. I found a couple of off the shoulder numbers. 8142 and this one, which comes with a full skirt or with a straight skirt, so 7926. I think that was quite an interesting detail with the sort of double strap bit at the neckline. So there we go, we're going into the semi-final with Serena, Rebecca, Raph and Farie. Fingers crossed for everybody, and I'll see you next week. Bye.